Good morning, viewers. Good evening from wherever you're watching from. Welcome to Semanami Show Worldview Political Snapshot. Today we are going to discuss the United States immigration journey from 1776 to date. This is going to be hot, inspiring, and educative. Fasten your belts and get ready. But before I do that, I want to share with you a verse from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 17, which reads, "But you, dress yourself for work, arise and say to them everything that I command you. Do not be dismayed by them, lest I dismay you before them." I don't want to explain the details about that verse, but it's very clear that, God is instructing us to say the truth as it is to those who are in power or in leadership, to everyone, right? Without fear or favor. Because God, who is sending us, is watching over us. So we should not be afraid to say the truth. In addition to that scripture, I want us also to read Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. The king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. So, at times, due to rhetoric, yeah, especially when it comes to campaigns, presidential candidates tend to either give positive or negative rhetorics in order to get elected. But whoever gets elected, yeah, especially to the countries that God has chosen to rule and lead the world, those leaders are normally and always guided by God. It's not by their own. Majority of the leaders whom we remember in history who made big progress or big changes to help um, man or human beings or the less privileged, they are normally guided by God. And just to go back to my previous video, I did state clearly that the elections of United States of 2024 were God's elections. They were God elections because there's something that God wants to do in the United States, which require a very strong leader like Donald J. Trump. You may not like him, but the leader is strong. And as I said earlier, God uses any vessel to accomplish his will. What Donald J. Trump stands for, majority of the things that he's saying are godly. And that's the reason, one of the reasons why he got elected with the majority, both popular vote and electoral vote. This is not just by coincidence. And to add on that, as I said in my previous video, the president-elect survived two assassination attempts. And if you go back to history, there are many presidents of his likes who survived because God wanted to use them to accomplish his will. And they did well, exactly what God wanted. So, in the connection of Proverbs 21, verse 1, for those who are scared, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. President Donald J. Trump's heart is in God's hands. So whatever he's going to do now that he has been elected will be God's direction. Look at his policies if they are not aligning with God. Just take your time and look at them. So God is going to use Donald J. Trump to align this country with God. So that being said, I'm going to take you through the United States immigration journey from 1776 to 2024. So tighten your belt because those are so many centuries and what those presidents did during that time. So in 1776 to 1789, this is called colonial era. In that time, President George Washington signed into law Naturalization Act of 1790 that limited naturalization to free white persons. President John Adams in 1798 Act signed into law an immigration law that restricted civil liberties. So you can see, there's some changes going on back and forth. Now, another period came because we have colonial era and we have early nationhood period, which is between 1789 to 1820. And this was during the time of Thomas Jefferson. For Thomas Jefferson, he signed into law a Naturalization Act of 1802, which extended naturalization period at that time. I don't want to go into details of what the acts specifics because it will take us a long time. That's the reason I'm rushing through the summary of what acts and which president signed that into law. That way we know how far we have come from and what progress we have made in this area, which is very burning issue in the American history. In 1820 to 1860, James Monroe signed Passenger Act of 1819, which regulated passenger ships. During that time, there were ships coming into the United States. So at that time, James Monroe signed an act to regulate that. That act is also, almost similar to Steerage Act of 1847, which also did the same purpose of regulating um, the passenger ships. But that one was signed by James K. Pollock, not James Monroe. So James K. Pollock just prolonged the Passengers Act of 1819. Now, another period came, which was the Civil War and Reconstruction of 1860 to 1877. At that time, this is the period of Abraham Lincoln, one of the most prominent and remembered president in American history. We all love him. Not only because of the emancipation, but his policies were humane. He had people in his hearts. So for him, he signed the Immigration Act of 1864, which encouraged people to come to the United States. Yeah. Then there came a Civil Rights Act of 1866 that granted citizenship to freed slaves. Abraham Lincoln freed slaves. Then Andrew Johnson signed into law a Civil Rights Act of 1866, which gave citizenship. to the freed slaves. All right. Then 1878 to 1924, there is a restrictive era. This is not a good period actually. It was, Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that banned Chinese immigration, that was signed by Chester A. Arthur. If you're, I think most of us were not there by that time. At that time, then we have the Immigration Act of 1882 that introduced head taxes. I know most of you are asking, what are these head taxes? Head taxes, these are the fees you pay whenever you go to US embassies, you pay that. But the purpose of that was, to help increase taxes for the US as well. So that head tax was introduced in 1882, but still existing up to date. And that was introduced by Chester A. Arthur. See, we are making progress. Then in 1892, we have Ellis Island Immigration Station that was established under Benjamin Harrison, which centralized immigration processing. You know how the immigration, when you send your paperwork and all this stuff is happening, that was introduced by Benjamin Harrison in 1892. Yeah. So that you all know what progress America has done in immigration history. Then we have the Immigration Act of 1903 that barred anarchists and epileptics, which was signed by President Theodore Roosevelt. Then we have one for, Asiatic Bad Zone Act of 1917 that was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson. I think Woodrow was not so good with immigration. Then we have 1924 to 1965 quota system that established quotas favoring, some immigrants. That was signed by Calvin Coolidge. I know we're also learning the presidents of the United States as we go by. So, this is very educative as well. As I said, where I go wrong, you can always come back and, point it out. Yeah, or whatever I miss. Because we have to be educative, accurate, and where we are not accurate, we stand to be corrected. Now, Coolidge didn't he didn't sign only the quota system immigration act, but also National Origin Act of 1924, which limited immigration from specific countries. That you can relate with what happened in President Donald J. Trump uh, first term. So some of the things are related. We just go back and forth in immigration story. And then we have Harry S. Truman, who did one of the best, Immigration Act of 1952 that abolished racial restrictions. You see, we are making progress from hard stands to where we are. In Harry S. Truman time, he abolished racial restrictions. Then now we come to the modern era of 1965 to present. Why am I giving us the history of immigration journey? Is to know how much progress America has made in terms of immigration from hard stance to where it is. Every president that has come to power has tried to make it better. And Trump is not going to be any different because he will be led and governed by God, not himself. This is a very big nation that God chose over the world to rule the world for a purpose. And for that reason, God has interest in it. Okay? God has so much interest in the United States that he cannot let it go under. There is no country like this in the world. He has to make it a perfect nation for everybody. And whoever God chooses to make that possible, he will do so regardless of the time. So this time is Donald J. Trump's time. There's a reason why God chose him. As much as we are fearful, there's the reason why God chose him. Theodore Roosevelt campaigned against labor union, but he became the supporter of labor union. Yeah, he's the only president who was elected at 42 years old. He's the only president who did a lot of progressive things. If you recall the Panama Canal, ambitious stuff. In the next episode, I will be relating Panama Canal and building of the wall. What is the impact and how are they related? Because at that time, Panama Canal was too ambitious to be done. But Theodore Roosevelt did it, and it paid a price positively to the economy of the United States. So if you compare Theodore Roosevelt and Donald J. Trump's immigration policies, they are almost similar, slightly different because of the time. Yeah. So this modern era now, which is 1965 to present, let's see what happened. In 1965, Immigration and Nationality Act was amended. And at that time, it abolished quotas. LBJ, I'm looking at Lyndon B. Johnson. You know, some of these are some of the presidents that are remembered in history. You can always hear the names being uh, mentioned here and there in most cases, especially when it comes to political matters of the United States. Theodore Roosevelt is mentioned heavily. LBJ is mentioned heavily. But hardly do you hear Coolidge and these other presidents. George Washington is mentioned heavily. Abraham Lincoln is mentioned heavily. These are presidents that were not against immigration. They were for immigration and making it better. Yeah? Because this is God's nation. And being a God's nation is a nation for immigrants. That must be told, and it has to be told. The truth has to be told as it is. So, this modern era of 1965 to present, Immigration and Nationality Act amendments of 1965 abolished quotas. Yeah, abolished quotas. And it introduced Refugee Act of 1980 that standardized refugee admissions. So we are making progress from hard stance to even now having Refugee Act standardizing it. But that one was signed by Jimmy Carter, who is a Democrat, in 1980. It gets interesting. Fasten your belt as we go further because you'll realize that Republicans are the best in immigration policy compared to the Democrats. It's a Republican, Abraham Lincoln in 1864, who invited immigrants. Yeah. The most favorite Republican of 1986, Ronald Reagan. I love that guy. He was a comedian, but his IQ, a leader who is remembered for what he did in immigration. And that's why I say, what you campaign is not how you are going to govern, because that seat is for God. God gives you the power to rule. Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 provided amnesty, and that was signed by Ronald Reagan. It's Ronald Reagan who saw it fit to give those who are here in the United States amnesty, and also to have tougher border controls, which uh, Donald J. Trump attributes to. Then we have also, introduced Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. This was signed by Bill Clinton. We all remember Bill Clinton. We all remember Ronald Reagan. Then we have the Real ID Act of 2005, enhanced ID requirements, and that was signed into law by George W. Bush. After that, we have DACA of 2012, deferred deportation for young and undocumented immigrants, implemented by President Barack Obama. So that's a preview of historical achievement of different regimes in American history on matters immigration. So we don't know what our president-elect Donald J. Trump has in store, but what I can tell you is that go home and always rehearse on Proverbs 21, verse 1, that the king's heart is in God's hands. The king's heart is in God's hands. The king's heart is in God's hands. And the king here is our president. Our president is in God's hands. God will turn it wherever he wants. It's God who is going to make it happen. It's God who is going to make those policies that he has come to pass. So as I said earlier, he's God's chosen and is going to fulfill God's wishes, God's will, because this time required him to be president. That's why God preserved him up to this time. Let us all pray for him that he will make good judgment, good decisions that are good for the country. And let us pray for him that God will give him wisdom to rule in accordance to his word, and to depend on God whenever he's making decisions, because all people are created by God, and it's God who put him there. So let him not forget that. That being said, uh, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sema Nami Show, Worldview Political Snapshot, and stay tuned for more, especially on our upcoming episode, where I will be discussing what is the relationship between Panama Canal and the building of the wall. Okay, how is it going to impact the domestic economic policies of the United States? How Panama Canal affected the economy of the United States, and what will the building of the wall do to the economy of the United States. So stay tuned. and we stand to be corrected. This is a channel that allows people to cross-check uh, everything that we are saying, and we stand to be corrected, and we always uh, hear you guys. So see you guys on our next episode. This is Vincent Obiero.